There was smoke pouring from Karen's backyard, and 3 cruisers idling in front of her hydrangeas. A deputy in mirrored sunglasses ducked under the yellow tape and shouted something about digital fraud, while a tech guy wheeled out a tower PC wrapped in plastic. And through it all, there she was, Karen Mitchell, president of the Cedar Pines HOA, shrieking at the officers, face red as her roses, fists clenched, barefoot on the lawn. Yep, that's me, watching from my porch with a cup of coffee and perfect Wi-Fi. You're probably wondering how we got here. Well, buckle in. When I moved into Cedar Pines, I genuinely believed I'd found peace. The kind of neighborhood where you could sip coffee on your porch without sirens in the background. The houses were just close enough to wave at, just far enough to keep your business your own. The first few weeks were quiet, birds, wind chimes, dogs barking at squirrels. Then came Karen Mitchell. HOA president, power walker-in-chief, clipboard enthusiast. She introduced herself the same day the moving truck left, armed with a laminated welcome packet, a forced smile, and a thinly veiled threat disguised as neighborly advice. "We really value uniformity here," she said, eyeing the slate blue trim on my window shutters like it personally offended her. I didn't think much of it at first. I'd lived in HOA neighborhoods before. I knew the game. Keep your lawn cut, keep your head down. But Karen? Karen wasn't playing the same game as the rest of us. She was building an empire, one bogus violation at a time. First, it was the porch lights. Too bright, she claimed. Then the recycling bin, left out for an extra 20 minutes past pickup. Then she flagged my mailbox for structural unevenness, which was HOA code for "I don't like you." But it was when my internet started acting up that I realized something else was happening. At first, I blamed the ISP, typical small-town speeds. But the drop-offs were oddly specific, between 6 p.m. and 10 p.m. nightly, then again early mornings. Video calls would freeze. My smart thermostat would kick itself offline. Weirdest of all, my router logs were showing unfamiliar devices. One night, while I was troubleshooting, I saw it. iPad KM child profile connected under my guest network. It wasn't just a name coincidence. KM Karen Mitchell. And I remembered the block party. 2 months back, I'd been guilted into hosting a neighborhood mixer. Potluck style, fold-out tables. Karen showed up with sugar-free cupcakes and an armful of HOA brochures. At some point, she asked for the Wi-Fi so her son could stream some cartoon on her tablet. I gave it out, my guest network, harmless at the time. I forgot about it the moment the party ended. Karen didn't. I confronted her the next morning casually. "Hey Karen, just curious, your son wouldn't happen to still be using that Wi-Fi from the party, would he?" She blinked too quickly. "Oh heavens no. We have our own service, fiber, very fast." She waved her hand like the whole thing was beneath her, but her lie was paper thin. Because when I checked my network's DHCP logs again, I saw a parade of devices. Smart TV, Mitchell, Ring, Cam, backyard, thermostat, upstairs, and most hilariously, Peloton, KM. I installed a traffic monitor and packet logger just to be sure. Over the next few days, I watched in real time as my network choked under the weight of Karen's tech addiction. Her Ring cameras uploaded constant motion data. Her Peloton streamed classes. Her Alexa answered dumb questions about zucchini recipes. All of it routed through my bandwidth. This wasn't casual piggybacking. This was full-scale signal theft. She'd hardwired her life into my pipeline and hadn't even bothered to hide it. I changed the password at 6:01 a.m. on a Monday. Thought I'd start the week with a little clarity. I didn't expect the doorbell at 6:08. Karen stood there in a leopard print bathrobe and slippers shaped like French bulldogs. Her hair was wet, and her mascara was halfway down her cheek. "Did you change your Wi-Fi password?" she asked, voice trembling, not with fear, but with indignation. I sipped my coffee. "Sure did." She blinked. "Without telling me?" I nearly spit my drink. "Karen, you're not on my account." "Well, I was," she snapped. "And everything was working fine until now. My home system is down. I can't even turn on my kitchen lights." "Sounds like a personal problem," I said, and gently closed the door in her face. That should have been the end of it. But Karen doesn't take loss well. Later that day, I found a bright orange violation notice taped to my mailbox. Non-standard grass blade length. She was retaliating. 2 days later, another notice. Improper use of personal lighting after dusk. Then another. Unapproved security camera location. She was trying to box me in, punish me for cutting the cord. But every move she made just made me dig deeper. I started logging her connection attempts, over a dozen failed tries in a single evening. She was still trying to brute force her way back in. My firewall caught every attempt, and each one left a fingerprint. Worse for her, she'd been sending bored emails, uploading violation documentation, and accessing HOA documents through my network. I didn't realize it yet, but she wasn't just stealing internet. She was leaving behind a trail of HOA correspondence, all originating from a connection she didn't have permission to use. Then came the Alexa screams. I was watering the lawn when I heard it, Karen's voice, shrieking at someone inside her home. Why is the thermostat at 90 degrees? Alexa, fix it. No, not that. She'd reset her system, but the cloud services weren't syncing right without stable access. Her smart home was collapsing under its own weight. Lights flickered. Her porch camera glitched. The sprinklers triggered midday and soaked a delivery guy. Neighbors started asking questions. Karen kept smiling, but her eyes were bloodshot. Her son stopped biking past my house. Then I got the email, sent from an anonymized address, but it had Karen's digital fingerprints all over it. You are in violation of Section 8 of the Cedar Pines Digital Use Policy. HOA members are expected to uphold a shared community infrastructure standard. Failure to cooperate may result in further action. The boldness of it was almost impressive. She was trying to invent rules to punish me for securing my own Wi-Fi. That's when I realized this wasn't just about internet. Karen needed control over the network, over the narrative, over the neighborhood. So I bought a signal jammer, not for use, just to place it visibly in my window. She noticed it the same day. Her husband, Bob, came by that evening with a Tupperware of lasagna and a weak smile. Hey neighbor, just wondering, you haven't noticed any interference on the network, have you? I told him the only interference I noticed was a flaming bag of bandwidth being stolen from my porch. He didn't laugh, just nodded slowly, turned around, and walked back across the street. The next morning, Karen's front yard was filled with lawn care workers. They replaced all the solar lights, trimmed every edge to geometric perfection, and added a decorative bird bath which, ironically, violated the same rules she cited in my last fine. I documented it all, not just the hypocrisy, but the desperation. Because here's what Karen didn't know. When you connect your life to someone else's network, and that someone happens to work in cybersecurity, you're not just stealing Wi-Fi, you're surrendering access. Every login, every ping, every email she thought she sent privately, it all traveled through a path I monitored. I didn't exploit it, not yet, but I archived it, filed it away, created logs, built a timeline. Karen thought she was punishing me for a disconnection. She had no idea she was building her own digital noose. And all because I changed a password. It didn't take a full week for Karen to shift into overdrive. After I cut her off from my Wi-Fi, she must have taken it as a personal declaration of war because the next HOA violation showed up less than 48 hours later. Bright orange, taped to my front door like a ransom note. Porch light exceeds lumen limit. 75 fine due in 14 days. I stared at it in disbelief. Same light I'd had since move-in. Same 60-watt warm LED bulb the last owners used, but now it was too bright. The next day, a second violation appeared. Mailbox misalignment, 4 degrees off axis, 50 fine. I checked with a level. It was dead straight. The third violation came 2 days after that. This one was the most absurd yet unapproved mulch coloration. According to Karen, my dark brown cedar mulch, purchased from Home Depot like every other red-blooded homeowner, clashed with the community aesthetic, which apparently favored pine straw or granite chips. I half expected the next notice to be for excessively opinionated grass. It wasn't just the violations. That would have been annoying but manageable. Karen escalated beyond that, into something darker, a full-blown whisper campaign. It started with a few sideways glances at the mailbox. Then came the cold shoulders at the grocery store. When my neighbor Nancy stopped walking her dog past my house after 3 years of routine, I knew something was up, so I checked the neighborhood Facebook group, Cedar Pines Strong. Sure enough, there was a post from Karen M. that didn't mention me by name but left no room for doubt. Certain residents are creating tension by rejecting community norms and have exhibited erratic behavior, including yelling at board members and cutting off communal access. The comments were filled with Karen's loyalists, the front row HOA regulars, chiming in with vague stories about feeling unsafe and uncomfortable. One claimed I was threatening community harmony. Another asked if background checks could be retroactively applied to homeowners. I read it all with a coffee in one hand and my blood boiling in the other. I knew what she was doing. She was building a case, one paranoid Facebook comment at a time. I'd watched Karen operate at enough board meetings to understand her style. Death by paper cut. No one act would draw blood, but stack enough together and you'd bleed out from exhaustion. She wanted me out. And if she couldn't find me into moving, she'd socially isolate me until I felt like I had no choice. But what Karen didn't realize, what she could never understand, was that I don't fold, I document. First thing I did was start archiving everything. Every violation notice got scanned and time-stamped. I set up a script to automatically scrape the neighborhood Facebook group every hour, pulling any post or comment that mentioned my name or any alias I was suspected to be. I printed out logs from my router showing the device names and timestamps that confirmed Karen's unauthorized usage. I even built a pretty little graph to visualize the data. Nothing gets people's attention like a chart. Then I went one step further. I installed a new security cam over the garage and upgraded my doorbell cam. Motion, activated, full audio, night vision, rolling cloud backups. I wasn't just going to catch her breaking rules. I was going to catch her red-handed. And I did. One morning, just after 5:30 a.m., I got a motion alert on my phone. I checked the feed and there she was, Karen, in yoga pants and a hoodie, kneeling by my mailbox with a level in one hand and a tape measure in the other. She glanced around nervously, then quickly snapped a photo from a crooked angle, making the perfectly fine mailbox look like it was slumping to one side. She was fabricating evidence. I saved the footage and added it to the folder marked HOA Karen Shenanigans. That folder was starting to get real thick. She didn't stop there. That afternoon, a new violation notice appeared. Unauthorized commercial activity. According to Karen, I was running an Airbnb out of my home. I laughed out loud when I read it. The accusation was based on numerous unfamiliar cars parked in my driveway. I don't even have guests. I work from home and order too much DoorDash, but the damage was done. That evening, a flyer appeared in every single mailbox on the street, printed, glossy, titled, "Is Cedar Pines becoming an Airbnb slum?" It had a photo of my house, taken from the sidewalk but zoomed in to look like surveillance, with a fake quote beneath it. "There are strangers coming and going at all hours. I don't feel safe letting my kids play outside anymore." There was no attribution, just a concerned neighbor. I'd had enough. I confronted her at the next HOA meeting. I showed up early, sat in the front row, and waited until the community concerns portion of the agenda. Karen tried to skip past it, but I raised my hand and didn't put it down. When she finally called on me, I stood and calmly laid out the facts, the bogus violations, the defamatory flyers, the fabricated Airbnb accusation. Then I dropped the bomb. I have security footage of Karen trespassing on my property at 5:30 a.m., manipulating evidence to justify a violation. The room went dead silent. Karen didn't even blink. She smiled like a snake and said, "I'm sorry, Mr. Carter, but the HOA has documented photographic evidence of multiple violations. If you'd like to contest them, you'll need to go through the proper appeals process." She slid a manila folder across the table to the secretary. Inside, I later learned, were manipulated screenshots, photoshopped images of different cars in my driveway with timestamps altered. I recognized one of the vehicles, my cousin's car from last Christmas. The date had been changed to last Tuesday. She even had a fake email exchange between herself and another concerned resident that I'm 99% sure she sent to herself from a burner Gmail account. The board, naturally, said they'd review the evidence. But I already knew the score. Karen was the board. The other members nodded when she nodded. They were bobbleheads in polos and khakis, too scared or too lazy to push back. I left the meeting furious, not just at Karen, but at the whole broken system that let her weaponize petty bureaucracy like a machete. But unlike her, I didn't need 5 signatures and a clipboard to fight back. I just needed a keyboard. Because what Karen didn't know, and what would become her greatest mistake, was that her HOA email account, her board correspondence, even the cloud server where she stored violation documentation, it had all been routed through my guest network. During those weeks, she was leeching my signal. Everything she sent went through my logs. I had timestamps, IP traces, DNS queries. Hell, I had metadata that showed she submitted fake violations while claiming to be out of town. I didn't hack her. I didn't spoof credentials. I just collected the footprints she left all over my digital property. And I wasn't done. I cross-referenced the emails with the HOA's website backend, which I realized, after some digging, had an unsecured admin panel. Not password-free, but close enough. A few social engineering tricks, and I was in. I didn't touch anything. I just watched. I saw how Karen edited minutes after the fact, deleting any reference to pushback or dissent. I watched as she logged into the document repository and uploaded violation forms with metadata showing they were created days after they were supposedly delivered. It was all there, in black and white, in HTML and JSON and packet logs. I was watching the slow-motion collapse of a digital empire, and Karen didn't even know she'd already handed me the match. All I had to do now was strike it. Karen Mitchell picked the wrong nerd to wage a suburban war against. What she never bothered to ask, what she never even considered, was who I actually was. She thought I was just some recluse with a stubborn streak and too many security cameras, a weirdo with porch lights too bright, and a mailbox that allegedly leaned. What she didn't realize was that I've spent the last 15 years working in federal-level cybersecurity, writing protocols to detect breaches, leading teams that audit Fortune 500 companies for compliance violations, and, occasionally, tracing ransomware attacks back to their country of origin basement hackers. I don't just understand digital forensics, I build the tools used to do it. And Karen had just handed me a buffet of legal ammunition by routing her HOA vendetta through my network. She didn't just steal Wi-Fi. She committed a string of federal crimes and left a trail of data so thick you could pave a driveway with it. At first, I treated it like a hobby, something to distract me from the HOA circus she'd orchestrated. Every time her Ring camera tried to phone home from my IP, I logged it. When she submitted a violation notice at 11:03 p.m., and the packet showed her device MAC address bouncing off my router, I took note. I started cross-referencing timestamps, matching up her official violation notices with the exact time her devices accessed my network. It was like watching someone forge checks with the security camera pointed at their own hands. She wasn't just accessing the HOA portal from my network, she was modifying documents. I found EXIF data buried in PDFs that showed edits made from IP 192.168, 1.18, a guest device tagged as Karen, admin, HOA, laptop. That same IP had submitted digital fines, updated board meeting agendas, and even archived a neighbor's complaint to make it vanish. All routed through my router, all without permission. That's when I realized this wasn't some petty neighborhood drama anymore. This was digital wire fraud. Unauthorized use of a private network to impersonate a professional entity, manipulate records, and execute a campaign of targeted harassment, all under the guise of HOA policy. On a personal level, she was violating my digital space. On a legal level, she was walking headfirst into a minefield of federal statutes. The Computer Fraud and Abuse Act, unauthorized access, data tampering, mail and wire fraud. I ran the scenarios in my head like a checklist, each one lighting up like a Christmas tree. The moment she used my network to issue a fine or file a document on behalf of the HOA, she crossed the line from obnoxious to indictable. So I did what any seasoned professional would do. I quietly filed a report. I packaged up a pristine timeline of events, access logs, metadata, packet captures, full server requests. I filed with the State Attorney General's office first, citing consumer fraud and unauthorized network access. Then I escalated to the local cybercrime task force. I didn't overreach. I didn't embellish. I simply laid it out: dates, IPs, file names, MAC addresses, and the digital footprints tying it all together. Every forged fine, every tampered agenda, every access to the HOA backend, all routed through an IP address she was never supposed to be on. I attached a cover letter, anonymized, explaining the situation and letting the evidence speak for itself. Then I waited. I didn't mention it to anyone, not the neighbors, not the Facebook group, not even Thomas, the only decent board member I half trusted. I watched Karen continue her little empire of lies with the calm detachment of a bomb technician who already knows which wire was cut. She'd show up to meetings with her smug smile, flaunting the power she'd built through manipulation and intimidation, completely unaware that every smug step she took was one closer to her own undoing. Meanwhile, I kept recording. I upgraded my home server to auto-backup everything off-site just in case. I started encrypting everything twice. Karen had proven she was reckless, but I couldn't rule out desperation. And then, when the time was right, I leaked just one thing. An anonymous letter, typed, clean, no fingerprints. It showed up in every HOA board member's inbox on a Friday morning. Subject line: imminent legal scrutiny, immediate action recommended. Inside was a simple message: an investigation is underway regarding the misuse of HOA digital infrastructure and unauthorized access of private networks. Members are advised to preserve all relevant documentation and refrain from deleting or modifying any records. A full audit is pending. Details attached. The details were screenshots, scrubbed of my own info but damning enough. Metadata, device names, IP logs. Snippets of timestamps showing her devices accessing the system. Enough to make any reasonable person pause. But this was Karen. Reasonable wasn't her flavor. At first, it was quiet. I watched the emails circulate. I'd configured an open tracker, invisible pixel beacons embedded in each attachment. I knew exactly when each board member opened it. First Thomas. Then two others. Then the secretary, who forwarded it to her husband, a local real estate attorney. Within 24 hours, I saw the ripple hit the community. The Facebook group went quiet. The usual Karen loyalists stopped posting. An emergency board meeting was scheduled. Private session, board members only. Then came the emails, not from the board, from neighbors. Quiet messages asking if I was okay. Vague references to something weird going on with Karen. One even admitted he'd been pressured to vote in favor of some policy he didn't understand, but that Karen had told him it was already decided. She'd been pulling strings behind the curtain for years, and now the curtain was starting to fall. I knew Karen would retaliate, and she did. That Monday, I got another fine. Hostile signage, unsanctioned communication materials observed on premises. I'd taped a simple paper sign to my inside window that said, "Smile, you're on camera." Apparently, that was threatening. 2 hours later, she showed up on my lawn again, this time with 2 board members in tow and a printed list of bylaws. She was red in the face. "You think you're clever," she spat. "We know it was you." I just smiled. "No idea what you're talking about, Karen, but you might want to double-check your network settings." She took a step toward me, waving the violation like a sword. I raised my phone and started recording. She froze. I didn't say a word, just smiled. A few seconds later, she stormed off. The next day, I got a phone call. Blocked number. The voice on the other end was clipped and professional. "Mr. Carter? This is Agent Linfield from the State Cybercrime Division. We'd like to set up a time to speak with you about the evidence you submitted. We've confirmed unauthorized administrative activity routed through your network. We're also seeing irregularities in digital documents tied to a nonprofit entity, the Cedar Pines Homeowners Association." I nodded slowly, heart pounding. "Happy to help," I said. "I've got records going back months." What followed wasn't dramatic. It wasn't some midnight raid or flashing lights. It was a quiet audit, a slow unraveling. One board member resigned, citing personal reasons. Then another. Karen stopped showing up to community events. Rumors swirled. Something about misuse of funds, fraudulent filings, potential charges pending. But I didn't have to say a word. I just watched. I made sure the backup stayed secure, and I kept my porch lights on a little brighter. Because the thing about cybercrime is this: it always leaves a trail. And Karen, for all her barking about order and rules, never understood the system she tried to manipulate. She thought she could lie and intimidate and fabricate without consequence. But every click she made while riding my stolen signal became evidence. Every packet she pushed became part of a digital paper trail she couldn't erase. In her obsession with control, she overlooked the one person in the neighborhood who controlled the network. And now? The board knew, the task force knew, the state knew. Karen had been so busy building her suburban throne, she didn't realize the moat around it was actually my firewall. And her whole kingdom? It was about to burn. The final HOA meeting of the year was held on a Thursday, 6 p.m. Sharp inside the Cedar Pines Community Center, a soulless beige building with fluorescent lights and cheap folding chairs that somehow felt more oppressive than any courtroom I'd ever stood in. I arrived 15 minutes early, wearing my nicest button-up shirt and a calm, measured smile. I brought no papers, no binders, no USB drives. Everything I needed had already been submitted. Everyone I needed to see it already had. Tonight wasn't about delivering the payload. Tonight was about watching it detonate. The room was fuller than usual, more than 30 residents packed into the space, buzzing with low murmurs. Some had heard rumors, some had seen the anonymous screenshots. A few knew what was about to happen. But most were just there for the spectacle. Suburban justice dressed in pastel cardigans and lawn-obsessed pettiness. Karen entered exactly on time, clipboard in hand, lips tight, posture perfect. Her eyes swept the room like a searchlight, scanning for threats. When she saw me sitting in the front row, legs crossed, sipping from a thermos that read, "Data never lies," she paused for half a second. It was the smallest hitch, a momentary glitch in her flawless programming, but it was enough to make the thermos taste even better. She called the meeting to order, rattling off the usual nonsense about community standards, monthly expenditures, and mulch compliance. Then, in what I can only assume she believed was an act of dominance, she cleared her throat and read aloud a new violation directed at me. Improper digital signage facing public street, recording devices creating an atmosphere of hostility. That was her last shot. One final desperate attempt to assert control. She didn't get to finish the sentence. Two men stepped through the back doors of the meeting room, moving with quiet purpose. Plainclothes, but unmistakably official. One flashed a badge so fast it looked like a magic trick. "Karen Mitchell?" he asked. She froze. "Yes? We need you to come with us." Her smile, already strained, cracked like cheap porcelain. "I'm in the middle of we have a warrant to seize all HOA managed digital devices under your control, laptops, tablets, any external drives. You'll be provided an itemized receipt. We recommend compliance." The room went dead silent. You could hear a fly land on a treasurer's notepad. A second officer moved toward the podium. Karen's hand instinctively clutched her clipboard like it might shield her from prosecution. "This is outrageous," she said, but her voice cracked halfway through. I stood. Not dramatically, just enough to get everyone's attention. I looked at her, then I looked at the room, and I started talking. "I'd like to enter something into the record," I said calmly. "As a homeowner, as a victim, as someone whose private network was used without permission to commit acts of digital fraud, falsify documents, and carry out a targeted harassment campaign under the guise of HOA enforcement." I held up a printed screenshot, just one, showing a file creation log from Karen's personal laptop with personal laptop bar crew place, routed through my guest network with a forged timestamp and a fabricated violation. "This document," I said, "was created from a device inside her house, using my internet. At a time she claimed she was out of town. It was used to fine me $250 for a mailbox tilt that didn't exist." I turned to the board. That's not negligence, that's malice, and it's just the beginning. Karen tried to cut me off. That's a lie, none of that. But the officer already had her laptop in his hands. Ma'am, he said, voice flat, please remain seated. I continued. This same device submitted at least 16 fraudulent violation notices, tampered with HOA meeting minutes, deleted community feedback records, and accessed the HOA's bank ledger using spoofed login credentials. All routed through a network she was explicitly told she was not authorized to use. I pulled out a small folder, the same one I delivered to the state cybercrime unit 2 weeks earlier. These are the full logs, MAC addresses, timestamps, DNS lookups. You don't have to take my word for it. The packet data speaks louder than any fake flyer or doctored photo ever could. The room erupted into low gasps and murmurs. Even her most loyal sycophants leaned back in their chairs like they were suddenly allergic to her proximity. One board member actually stood and stepped away from the table entirely. Karen's face was pale, lips pressed so tightly they looked bloodless. I was framed, she hissed. This is a setup. He's manipulating the data. You did that yourself, I replied. Every email you sent, every document you faked, every line you rewrote, you didn't just cross a line, Karen. You built a zip line over it and invited everyone to ride. The officers escorted her out 15 minutes later. No cuffs, not yet. Just a quiet walk of shame past the people she'd belittled, manipulated, and fined into submission for years. A few neighbors looked away, most didn't. One woman, the same retiree who Karen once forced to remove a bird bath for wildlife overconcentration, actually clapped. It wasn't loud. But it was enough. Karen was forced to resign that night. The board voted unanimously, even the ones who'd once backed her every move. Her resignation email, ironically, was submitted from a library computer. Her home internet had been suspended pending a digital evidence audit. Her devices were seized. Her accounts were locked. The following week, the charges dropped: computer fraud, unauthorized access to a protected network, forgery, document tampering, wire fraud, over a dozen counts. The local news picked it up under the headline, "Oh, Queenpin indicted in Suburban cybercrime scandal." I framed the clipping and put it in my garage. With Karen gone, the HOA entered a kind of stunned reformation. Board positions opened up. The bylaws were reviewed by an actual legal team. The violation system was suspended pending a full audit. Neighbors who hadn't spoken in months started gathering again. Lawn chairs reappeared on front porches. The community Facebook group, once a digital minefield of passive-aggressive policing, turned into a legitimate discussion forum. Someone even started a poll about restoring the old spring picnic. For the first time in years, Cedar Pines felt like a neighborhood again, not a gated kingdom ruled by paranoia and paper notices. I didn't run for the board. That was never the point. I helped draft the new digital use policy. I made sure they implemented proper access protocols, encrypted storage, and unique credentials for all board members. I even gave a brief presentation about ethical network administration and personal data responsibility. It wasn't glamorous, but it felt right. Restorative, clean, honest. Karen's smart home never fully recovered. Without access to the central system, her devices went dark one by one. Her Ring cameras blinked out. Her Peloton displayed a login error for weeks. Even her automatic sprinkler system got stuck in test mode and ran for 4 hours straight during a drought advisory. Her house, once a fortress of HOA-approved compliance, became a blinking monument to a failed regime. She tried to sell, couldn't, word spread too fast. No one wanted to buy a house with that kind of baggage, or with an active digital restraining order against its previous owner. As for me, I quietly renamed my guest network, a simple nod to the journey. FBI Van 3, no password, no devices connected. Just the name, a reminder that sometimes justice doesn't come with sirens or subpoenas. Sometimes it comes with a packet log, a good router, and a man who knows how to read the code between the lies. That spring, the grass in front of Karen's house grew long. No one reported it. No violation was filed. No flyer appeared in her mailbox. The silence was almost poetic. And across the street, on my porch, I sipped coffee, smiled at my camera, and finally, truly, enjoyed the signal.